We are joined on the Daily Signal by Mark Morgan. He's a former commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, a Newsmax contributor, and most importantly, a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Mark, there's so many things we could talk about when it comes to the Biden border crisis, but I want to just begin by having you give us an assessment of where things are today, here, the end of April, and what we're facing next month.
Look, so far what we've seen in the first 14 months of this administration, it's the worst crisis we've ever experienced on our southwest border. The numbers tell the story. If we move to just this fiscal year alone, the first 6 months of this fiscal year, 1.2 million encounters, over 300,000 gotaways, and a couple 100,000 turnbacks. That's over 1.7 million illegal aliens that have tried to break into this country. That shatters every 20-year record highs. And right now, we're on. It's getting worse, and I know most people have heard about the end of Title 42. Once that ends, I always steal Senator Kennedy's line, where that's going to be like the Hindenburg crashing into the Titanic.
Tell our audience what Title 42 is, why it was put in place to begin with, and what the consequences of ending it will be.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So Title 42, it's not an immigration policy, it's a public health policy. When we're in the throes of the worst global infectious disease pandemic we saw, Title 42 allowed Border Patrol agents to further reduce the introduction of COVID-19 into the country. It made sense. So we were able to actually remove those that were illegally entering in a couple hours. Again, I think that saved countless American lives, saved untold amount of suffering. This administration and their, again, infinite wisdom of open border policies now have decided to end Title 42. They've used that in the past 14 months to remove well over 1 million illegal aliens. And so once they remove that, those illegal aliens they've been removing, now they're going to come into the United States. And they're anticipating it's going to take this catastrophic crisis, make it worse. And that's why I say it's going to be like the Hindenburg crashing into the Titanic.
It's truly remarkable. So you gave us some numbers. So what does it look like? Are there any projections in terms of what we're currently seeing, which is overwhelming, and
right,
what it will be like at the end of May once this is rescinded?
Yeah, I think that's another good question. So in March, what we just saw was about 220,000 encounters. The Border Patrol's own chief, I refer to him as the embattled chief because I don't think he's doing enough right now, is he's saying we're going forward, we're going to see sustained numbers, but anywhere between 7,000 to 9,000. For the rest of the year. And we're just now entering the peak season of illegal immigration. But then once Title 42 ends, you're going to see this additional tsunami. They're saying it could be anywhere from 18,000 to 20,000 a day for a little while. And the reason why we know that is because just the rhetoric, the cartels are already exploiting it. And they're telling the illegal aliens now, as soon as Title 42 goes, they're going to release all of you in the United States. So we're seeing massive amounts of illegal aliens that are kind of positioned on the Mexican side right now, waiting for Title 42 to end. And when it does, that's why you're going to see this additional kind of tsunami come on the tsunami we've already faced.
And what are they going to do with all of these illegal aliens who do come into our country? Because it's not just going to be Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and California.
Right.
They're going to go into communities all over this country, I would imagine.
That's all right. This is why I love talking to you, right? Because you've got this, you understand this, and that's the issue. So to actually address this catastrophic crisis on top of a crisis once Title 42 ends, they're not doing anything to reverse policy. They're not doing anything to secure the borders. They're not doing anything to stem the flow of illegal immigration. Nope. Their mandate right now is just to get better at processing and getting faster at releasing individuals to every town, city, and state in this country, and that's what we're seeing right now.
And your colleague, Tom Homeland, has a new piece in the Daily Signal about this idea of giving them phones so they can keep track, but there are some problems with that as well.
It is. It's kind of silly. Look, it's part of what's called ATD, alternatives to detention. It's really a part of a much larger issue. So, they sometimes they put ankle bracelets, now it's phones. It really doesn't matter because at the end, it's all failure. It's all about that they do not want to apply consequences. They will not detain anybody. So think about it. You illegally enter the country, they facilitate that, and there's no consequences and there's no deterrence because they're basically systematically ending detention. And so they're releasing people in the United States, and then they won't allow ICE to remove them. And the phones, the ankle bracelets, it's a joke. At the end of the day, when they get a final order removal, they don't comply. It's a joke. And here's another thing, too, another false narrative. A lot of the illegal aliens coming in, they already have their own phones.
You have spent your career in law enforcement. You've worked with the Border Patrol. You've seen this up close and personal. What's the morale of the people who are on the front lines trying their best to enforce the law and keep our country safe?
Yeah, I appreciate this question. I truly believe that the men and women of the United States Border Patrol are just simply heroes. I mean, every single day, even though every imaginable tool, authority, and policy has been taken away from them to do their job to protect this country, every single day they're still getting up, putting their badge on the chest, and walking to the front lines of our nation's border, risking their lives to do their job, even though it's virtually impossible right now. We've heard from the Border Patrol agents that they feel like now they're nothing more than a federal travel agency for the illegal aliens themselves. You know, I recently got information from a 26-year veteran in the Border Patrol that as he was getting ready and he's looking in the mirror and he's getting his uniform all squared away, he looked up and he said, you know, I had this rush come over me, and he goes, I realized as he was looking at himself in the mirror, he said that I'm now part of the largest federal smuggling organization in the world. You know, my heart sank. He goes, I'm no longer proud to be a part of the organization that I've been for 26 years of my life. Wow. It's devastating.
We've seen some state leaders take action. Governor Abbott recently in Texas, Attorney General Mark Brnovich in Arizona, declaring it an invasion. Right. He's been on the Daily Signal podcast to talk about that. With the federal government seemingly inept and incapable of acting on the president's orders, what can states do to try to step up to the game and make sure that we are safe?
Well, this is where we're at now. We need to be talking about this more. And we talk about the federal government's incapacity. Let's make no mistake, it's by design. They are intentionally abdicating their constitutional responsibilities. In the Constitution, a thing called the Guarantee Clause, which says the federal government has the mandate responsibility to protect the states from threats from outside our borders. It's clearly this administration has abdicated that responsibility. I think that the case can be made for this is a full-on invasion of our southwest border driven by the cartels. And so there's also this little thing in the Constitution, like you said, A.G. Brnovich, his team did a really good job of walking through the analysis. I really encourage your listeners to take a look at that, where he walks through. There's also a thing called states self-help part of the Constitution, where it says if the federal government fails to do their job, the states have a remedy within the Constitution to help themselves, to protect themselves. We first have to get over the hurdle. Is this a definition? I think A.G. Brnovich is right. I think this satisfies what's happening in the definition of invasion from our forefathers, and that would allow states to not enforce immigration law, because they can't enforce federal immigration law, but they can protect themselves from the threats pouring across their border.
So one of the things that Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts has called on, and I believe you support as well, is the impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security. Obviously, that's not going to happen with this current makeup of Congress, but perhaps in the next Congress, that'll be a situation. Aside from that, what are the other steps that members of Congress can take to really put the pressure on this administration to reverse course and really wake up to the threat that we're facing?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One, you're absolutely right. I do support impeaching Secretary Mayorkas. Look, he knows. He's a smart guy. He was the former Deputy Secretary of DHS. He knows that his open border policies are negatively impacting every aspect of our nation's public health, safety, and national security. He knows it, but he's being driven by ideology. He's turning a blind eye. He has failed the United States. He has failed this country, so he should be impeached. But there's a couple other things in addition that we do when we work with Congress. One is oversight. Right? We need to hold this administration accountable from the president all the way down. And so we're working with members of Congress right now so when they, hopefully, the right people get in place and they regain the majority, they can start having appropriate hearings and start calling the appropriate people to testify and hold them accountable. The other thing is legislation. Look, we've been saying a long time, you just can't throw money in people at the border crisis and think that's going to solve it. It's not. It's going to take that plus legislation, a really solid policy to end the open border policies we have right now. So we're working with Congress as well. I hope in January, as soon as the new members get sworn in, that House Bill 1 is down there with all the policies that's needed to secure the border.
Do you think completing the wall will be one of those?
It better be.
Final question for you. I think there are so many issues confronting our country right now. Why should this be one of the priorities that the American people are focused on?
Yeah, so look, of all the questions, I really appreciate that question the most, because there's a misunderstanding, and some of it's done by design by this administration, open border advocates, that somehow what happens on the southwest border stays there and doesn't impact anybody else. It's just a lie. It's not true. It's why we say every town, city, and state is a border town, city, and state. I promise. The bad things and bad people that come across the southwest border, they're making their way to every town, city, and state. Let's take drugs, for example. 100,000 Americans died in a 12-month period because of drug overdose. That's more Americans that died from all the terrorist attacks, the Iraq, Vietnam, and Afghanistan wars combined. 100,000 in a 12-month period. Guess the leading cause of adults from 18 to 45 is fentanyl. Guess where it all comes from? All the drugs, southwest border. We never hear about that. You know, the 6, 7, 800,000 gotaways that have evaded apprehension, they don't stay on the border. They make their way to every town, city, and state, and there's some very bad people among them committing very violent crime in every state across this nation. That's why it's important to all of us.
Well, Mark Morgan, thank you for making it front and center and doing all that you do, not only to focus on the problem, but put forward solutions. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.